I'm Erik Anderson, the founder of West River Group, the CEO of Singularity University. I've been focused on providing capital and leadership into the global innovation economy for the last 20 years. And I am passionate about applying learnings and the technology that's emerging, that's available to all of us, to make the world better, solve some grand challenges, and hopefully make a smooth transition to what is going to be an exciting time.
Erik, it's a real pleasure to have you, an absolute privilege. And I don't think you're doing justice to yourself by saying, that Singularity University only. I've seen the portfolio of the companies that you're working on, and it's and there's some outstanding companies there. As we look into the future, Erik, what are the kind of things that make you feel that what you're doing at this moment is genuinely meaningful?
That's a great question. One thing to think about is I was raised by a nurse, so sometimes the beginning, middle, and end come back together. So my mother was a nurse, and I was raised by a nurse, and I give a little talk on that. It fundamentally means that nurses care. At the end of the day, nurses care. That's the core part of that. Whether it's the morning, the evening, the night, whether you're with people or you're alone, nurses are care. So I think that that value and that idea was, I lived in an immersive environment, right, of caring. My mom built a nursing college, etc. So when you come forward and you have the good fortune that I have in a small way to either influence things or bring things forward, I'm always thinking about caring. And most of the work we try to do that I'm involved with, whether, as you said, other companies, Colossal Bioscience, or what we did with experiences, there's this sense of trying to have apply care and care, be caring, and as we go through it. And I think that has meaning because it makes those things, makes you a good steward of either the opportunities and the implementation. And so that's the principle, if you will, or the value that I try to bring forward in what we're doing.
That's an amazing response, because my other question was going to be, let's talk about little Erik, and you already have. Little Erik was brought up by nurses, and you've touched on something beautiful, and to me, it's more than caring. It's about empathy, it's about humanity, it's about compassion, and that inner energy. And my philosophy here is that in this world of digitization, anything that can be digitized will be, because it'll be a million times fast. It'll be a million times faster and a million times cheaper. But anything and everything that cannot be digitized, love, compassion, harmony, ethics, trust, soul, spirit, common sense, critical thinking, judgment, intuition, all of these things will be a million times more valuable. So if we can build businesses and environments around these more human skills, this is where my personal thesis is where the future is going to be. From your perspective, am I just smoking something, or is this real?
I think you're absolutely correct and right. And even the little things we see. So I built that company, Top Golf. People know about this. Being a large company, get a large brand. But our thing was creating moments that matter, right? And connecting, people in meaningful ways, right? So it's create and connect. So to your thesis, right, the idea that, those are fundamental. Creating and connecting, right, are like right at the heart, whether you're having children, whether you're creating a business, a piece of art, and of course, connecting us together. And so I think that's right. So all in all, while Topgolf had all kinds of technology, right? We try to do, as you said, faster, better, more games, more of this. But it's the stories that came from that ecosystem, that environment. The little boy and his mother who would come, and they'd come, and we'd see them, and he was bald, and it was like that's where he was happy after chemotherapy. Right. So it was a wonderful game, but it was our people who were realizing that and say, well, of of course, we're not charging you or whatever. And we made those moments, but that's humanity in its purest, right? A mother's
Yeah.
love for a child, so so our technology was great, but it was our associate interfacing with the mother and child and using that, but there was no replacing, right, that empathy, that your important word,
Yeah.
and that's just everywhere. We see it everywhere we go. Once you're out of the digital world, you want to be with people, and it's getting more and more stark, right? You go from A to B, right? Whatever that is.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So you are sitting at the nexus of, on the one hand, you have decarbonization, and then you have experiences, and then you have technology and other areas. And I see this sort of these Gutenberg moments. I mean, Gutenberg invented the printing press, and the whole world changed. Today, we have 25 Gutenberg moments happening simultaneously. And they're all converging and they're all overlapping and intertwining. And that's why we create drones, because there are 10 technologies that have connected and cross-fertilized, and therefore we can have a drone, and many others. These convergences at the nexus of this point is where all what I call the creative abrasion is happening. Where do you see the real opportunities coming out in what I would call the divergence that's going to happen? The new things that are going to happen out there. And I would go as far as saying the unintended consequences and the unexpected businesses that we never really anticipated. Serendipity clicks in.
Yeah, it's really interesting question. Of course, since it's hard to predict those sorts of things, as you say. So you're the futurist. I think it's really going to be interesting around what people do with all this free time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's really where I see all the unexpected things. These people are just getting more and more time, because they don't. So I'm not sure where that goes. Actually, you see that in creative, in the creative community. I'm fascinated by the next generation and watching how they're using their time to just create more and more experiences. Like, I guess the thing that doesn't seem to go away is this need for experiences and connectivity. And I think Taylor Swift is like, I mean, I used to, I mean, but I just use that, right? I mean, Taylor Swift, has emerged, right, as, she's found the story, the thread. She's obviously digitized everything in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like, but she's found this common human story in some ways of a woman's journey from young to
Yeah.
old, right? And she's the great storyteller and
Yeah.
the great empathetic leader of many women's experience from beginning to end. Not all, I mean, for all kinds of reasons, right? But she's captured this thread of humanity in an entertaining, experiential, and technological way. And so I
Yeah.
use who would have thought, right? You'd have a person
Yeah.
with billions, right?
Yeah.
With that kind of power. And that was, I think, unexpected, to use an example. So I think that time and creativity and connectivity comes together in those kind of ways.
Yeah. So, as a futurist, one of the key things I talk about is the fact that I think it's extremely difficult now to anticipate things, because when things are moving exponentially, then it's very difficult to grapple with them anyway. And now they're cross-fertilizing with multiple exponential trends happening simultaneously. So outcomes are very, very difficult to define at this point in time. What I think we can define are the fundamentals. So one of my fundamental question, and ask in my presentations, is what would be the most important thing defining our future? I'll ask this rhetorical question to you. What one thing do you think will help us to define our future? There's no right answer. I just have a
No,
version.
this is the first time, right, I've heard the question. So it's a great question. I think it's going to have to be around, connectivity and, in a way, how the collective comes together.
Mhm.
I just, So I travel over 200 days a year around
Right,
the world,
right.
and we're all gonna we're gonna have abundance. So things to me which I think we can know. I believe, and we talk about Peter DeMatteis, my good friend, and the world is creating more abundance, or
True,
we're creating opportunities. We're not very good at distributing it yet. We're going to
true.
have to figure out some form of distribution, whether it's the United States or India or China or
Mhm.
wherever, right? We have too much imbalance. We're going to have to close that in some thoughtful
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And that's that connectivity and community, because otherwise I fear there would be too much, unrest. And I would say justified unrest, right? We can't live in a system that has that much, um,
disparity.
disparity. It just,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it, it's not sustainable.
indeed.
And we're gonna have to address that, and it's gonna be interesting because we're gonna have the capability to address it. So then we'll really be faced with how do we lead through that system to address it, because there
Yeah,
won't there won't be any good excuses at that point, I think.
indeed. And it's a very intelligent answer, and there's a lot of merit in that. I have a different perspective, which is linked and connected to it, and that is that our future is going to be defined by trust. There's
I like
so
that.
much, there's so much deficit of trust in the world today.
Mhm.
Uh, Most of the institutions that were created, World Bank, IMF, United Nations, were created 75, 80 years ago for a problem that existed 75, 80 years ago. They cannot address today's problem. So there's a trust deficit in terms of organizations, in terms of politics, and generally speaking, there's a huge trust deficit. So,
I
and then with
couldn't I couldn't
and,
agree more with that. In fact, I'll send you after this. I'm going to send you a couple things.
yeah,
I'll send you a talk I've given. That happens to be
okay,
called "What's on Your Whiteboard," but in there is a big element about trust,
yeah,
right? That we move at the speed of trust. And then there's a great paper that a professor of mine wrote. I don't know if it ever got published, about the best organizations in the world run on trust, not
yeah,
incentive, actually.
absolutely, absolutely
Right.
right.
So
And the
I couldn't agree more with that. And I suppose, like you say, there's that connection between
mhm.
the trust that the system is going to distribute or create opportunity fairly, is in some ways right at the heart of trust, right? That exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust to me is at the center. And if I look at a trifecta, we have ethics on one side and we have values on the other. And
Mhm.
this triangle to me is going to define our future, because AI without trust and ethics is going to be a disaster.
Yes.
And it could almost be a weapon of mass destruction. Institutions, organizations, politics, we need to rebuild that trust and connection back in again. And people think trust is just about truth and honesty, and it's not. It's way more than that. It's layered. It's about 8 different layers of trust that goes in there. I talk a lot about trust, and I talk about trust on boards and how we build trust and how uh, and so on. So
At our
that's
company, if you had one of my associates on there, we talk about the trust journey.
yeah,
That every organization is a trust journey.
and it's a currency, and trust can be
Agree.
a currency. Your organization and your reputation and brand is built around trust, and therefore that brand value between your underlying assets and what you can get, that brand is trust.
Mhm.
And,
Makes a lot of sense. I agree.
so this is how I define the future: is build it around trust.
Well, if you
You
thought about the description we use, whether it was Topgolf or anything else, which has had that success, people know they could have the experience that it would
sure,
work, right? The
yeah,
first thing is, does it work?
yeah,
Which is
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Our associates would see that, we could create moments that matter
yeah,
and create meaningful connections. And you could see in the story I told you, right, that they could trust it, that they could give away, if you will,
yeah,
not
yeah,
give away, but they could use our place and our home
yeah.
as a way to engage with the family that was going through, difficult times, and could come back and say to us as a leader, or me as the founder, you couldn't, I gave away a free thing today. And you'd be, what are you doing? That can't possibly write my KPIs. And we go, but the real thing is,
Yeah,
look what I created for for this family. And that's why the creation and connection were so important. But embedded in that is just affirming your thoughts was the trust that they could rely on our brand to do the right thing.
Absolutely. I mean, here, our cell phones and so on, we take trust leaps in terms of technology. We send money, we receive money. Everything has to be built around trust. And if we don't trust this, that's what the currency absolutely is. So that was a philosophical question. Another one which I encounter a lot in boards, and since you are in the space of building capital together, and that's an immune system. Humans have an immune system. Anything that's coming from outside is actually blocked by our antibodies, any virus, and so on. And the same happens in companies. We spoke about exponential transformation. Exponential transformation is an extremely scary external virus that is coming within an organization, and boards get stuck. So the immune system response clicks in, can't do it, it's too expensive, it's too fast, it won't be bought, it can't, and. So I actually bring about what I call a lot of immunosuppressants or catalysts that can make boards take decisions to move forward. What is, in your experience, and you're looking at boards, especially some of the young companies that you are leading, what is there much of that immune system and that sort of culture resistance that happens, and what kind of things do you do to shape them?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I do a lot of board work, both because I'm on boards, but also thinking about boards. Yeah. We take you on a little thought journey here, where what we've done at West River and some work we've thought through is that first starts with some structure. So we break everything into what we're doing, we call it execution, and what we could do, we call options. Okay. So the first beginning point for the structure in the thought pattern, or if the picture, if you're on a board or a CEO, is there's what I'm doing and what I could be doing. Yeah. And right, oddly enough, if that's the first picture, and managing optionality or thinking about creating optionality and that portfolio of options becomes a core capability, competency, or incredibly important, especially in a world of disruption and volatility, because by definition, options become more valuable right along the way. So the first thing is we actually have that picture. Once that picture's in place, you no longer view options and disruption and volatility as scary. You view it as fundamental. Yeah. And elevated at to the highest level with the CEO and the board. It's now part of the conversation. If you leave it back somewhere, all those sort of things around there, and it's not addressed, then the immune system is like, it just kills it just kills everything. Yeah. Why? Because it might this is funny, it might disrupt my budget this year. And anything that disrupts budgets are the thing that most companies live and die by. Yeah. And if something goes wrong with the budget, only bad things happen to me as an individual. So you have to get and you have to get back to the more ideas have probably been killed by I can't miss this quarterly budget of sales or something than anything, right? The number one, the biggest immune system is do not miss the budget. Indeed, that's not alert. So we create. So yes, it's everywhere, and the work that we've done is we try to suggest to people that you have to embrace the possible, and that the board has to embrace that there's an active voice and structure around understanding the possible and the optionality, in the business, and that makes disruption and exponential change actually turns it into your friend, not your enemy.
Indeed. In spite of that, I think results, outcomes, budgets, share prices, all of those things, they click in very, very quickly. One of the tough questions I ask, and I dare say you've encountered it over the last year or so, that if you were doing your budget in November, December 2022, without a ChatGPT having hit the numbers, and then suddenly it happens, and by about June, July, August, your HR department is disappearing, your people are using things differently, your compliance issues are clicking in, and your budget's out of the window. By the time you get yourself organized. So when And this will only accelerate because we are now at that point in time where this thing is happening. So a couple of questions. One of them is, how tolerant are you when people are completely missing stuff? Not because they're not doing a good job, because the shifts are happening too fast. Secondly is Moses didn't come down as an 11th commandment that the financial year has to be 12 months. I mean, it can be 3 months or 6 months and have faster cycles of planning. So that we need to start re-looking at our board structures, at our team structures, at our financial management structures and stuff like that for this new world, and nothing is changing.
Well, if you go back to the discussion we just had, you'd have you'd have execution value, which is, let's say, is a typical discounted cash flow value.
Yeah.
Option value, which is entirely different. If you add those two things up all the time, in theory, if you're measuring them, right, in the quarter, you could say, wow, this has happened. I've got lower costs because of ChatGPT. I've lost a revenue opportunity to something because I've been disrupted by someone's, we'll just use the ChatGPT as the thing. And I have an option that's been created in my customer base because of that. So if I have a true dashboard, and the reason I use that dashboard is if I added all those up, I could be up 20%, down execution value, up on costs, and up on the option value. That's the reason we use that structure, is that's actually in some ways should be a complete scoreboard, and it changes real time. So, so the fact is that I created, I actually have a new business, but you'd have to have a holistic look. So your tolerance then is for volatility. And I describe volatility as gravity. You can try to fight gravity and ignore it, but it's there. Right? And you can try to ignore volatility and ignore it. That's just like fighting gravity, right? It exists. But if you saw the complete dashboard, your option, which is embedded in future cash flows, but not 100% predictable, your option value has gone up, cost gone down, some future cash flows lost. If you add all those up, you're gonna, as a board, you're gonna say, hey, we're ahead, but that's our reality. That's why the optionality and the volatility embedded there is so important, because that is a new part of reality.
That's a brilliant answer, and I think you've thrown in so many elements in there, how we need to be extremely adaptable, which is actually needs to be one
agility is maybe
agility and adaptability are the two critical factors there, because without that we won't be able to do anything. One of the shocking statements that I make, I said, change is very yesterday. I mean, change is now too slow. Transformation is better. With all the things that are happening, we may have to keep reinventing ourselves regularly. And in some cases and in some industries, we need metamorphosis. You can be a faster caterpillar, but to be a butterfly, you need to fundamentally go into your pupa and change and liquidize and come out as a beautiful butterfly. And I think a lot of companies and organizations and stuff like that are finding it themselves at a really difficult point at this time. And that's where we spoke about singularity. The whole philosophy there and the whole learning there is so critical. How do you see bringing that kind of learning into corporate life? Because they desperately need that at this point in time, and they need to be less scared, or perhaps more scared. Just as a little aside, I mean, I used to talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, and my new thing, which you can use regularly, is the new thing is called FOBO, FOBO, which is fear of becoming obsolete.
Yes.
So now we have FOBO clicking in. And when FOBO clicks in, that's when singularity clicks in. That's when learning clicks in. That's when the ability to change clicks in. And I don't think people are doing it fast enough until the shit hits the fan.
Well, of course, I would have to agree. Part of the human condition, right, is, I'm not sure people love volatility.
No, they don't.
So, however, I do believe now there's a profound insight that you already mentioned in a way. Volatility used to be perceived mostly as risk.
Yes.
I think volatility now can start to be conceived as mostly opportunity.
Hmm.
So that's an important mind shift. And we certainly, certainly some of our work and work we do is like thinking, overweight may be the opportunity as opposed to the risk. The risk is still, of course,
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
and it's imminent, right?
Yeah.
But you have to, if we have to get the future of opportunity, right? Foe or something like that, right?
Yes.
So because that pulls you in a good direction. One of the things we're seeing now at Singularity that's really interesting is what we'll call modern succession planning. So
Mhm.
there's no way for Singularity or I think any organization to flip and switch and say, hey, you're no longer fearful and the world is great of opportunity and we're all going to be, big mogul, deep mogul skiers now because that's just fun. Let's go down the Black Diamond and you know, that not going to happen overnight. We're not going to take everybody on the mountain and do this. I don't think you have to have everybody on the mountain to be able to do that. You have to have leaders
Mm.
that will do that. Comes back to your trust. What we're seeing the best organizations doing now, and this is you asked this question early, what's changed in Singularity? The ability to be part of succession planning and visioning with the core next generation of leaders
Mhm.
and adopt that is really a new piece of work for us. It's a little
Yeah.
under the radar. We don't talk to a lot of people, but some of the best organizations are coming to us and saying, here's my next 100 leaders. How should they think? How should they act? What can they rely on? What's most important? You can rely on the exponential curve. It is there everywhere.
Yeah.
You not only can you rely on it, you must do it. You have to accept volatility. So you're going to have to create tools and management things. Back to your thing. You're going in that environment, 100% trust is more important than ever, right? Um, Norms will be more important than control. Control will go out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leadership, right, will become much more valuable.
Mhm.
Creation. So that's what we're seeing in our work. Finding and the best companies leaning in and going, I've got to get this next generation, ready. But somehow I don't think that reading, Drucker's work, or something who I love, or
Yeah.
Michael Porter, Five Forces, somehow that doesn't seem complete anymore, right?
Indeed.
We're in a different place. So that's what it's finding those principles and the
Yeah.
new things that you can rely on and that you must be expert at managing:
Yeah.
volatility, agility, trust, exponential. Those are the key tools going forward.
Indeed. And I think you mentioned this. I do a program, or I have a rule. It's called a 60-40-20 rule, which is the 60 somethings are making the big decisions, the 40 somethings are executing, but the young youth population, the 20 somethings, are the biggest consumers. So there's a two generational gap. So I've created
Mhm.
what I call shadow youth boards, where the maximum age is 25. And they actually sit right next to the board and literally sit on their shoulder and I say, have you thought about this, sir? Um, and what that has done in a couple of the boards that I have executed this is to change the dynamics, change the conversation, because if you put in another board member that might replace the incumbent board member, then they get scared and then they block everything. But a 23-year-old is not replacing them. But the
Right.
23-year-old can run circles around them when it comes to anything which is digital technology and so on. And they are the young consumers and the future thinkers. That is another interesting bridge, Erik,
Yeah, I agree.
which I'm finding that now the new boards are coming in, and I even talk about the new CEO office with these, that you'll need a 23-year-old, you'll need the human person who has empathy, connection, and relationship with your clients,
Right.
and you need an AI bot. These three things are the new CEO office. It's not having a whole environment and hundreds of people around. You need these three, and that is one of the ways to control the new CEO, new chairman's office.
No, I think that's a really great idea. The other thing we haven't talked about here, but I know it's on your mind and my mind is the other thing about the 25-year-old, but I don't think this has hit their consciousness yet. They're going to live to 150.
That's right. Yeah.
So now everything looks different. So longevity, which of course is we all might be a personal fan of.
Yeah.
But I'm always careful to take a vote in my company is how many people think it's a good idea if Erik lives to 150. But we'll leave that for another day. We'll just be
Yeah.
hopeful. But the reality is, we believe, right, that that's a new underlying reality.
This is
People
very
will
true.
live and be productive longer.
Yeah.
And not only will they live longer, they'll have more free time for
You
longer,
know,
which is
you mentioned free time several times, but with all of this new technology, I have less free time. So
well,
I
that's a
don't know
choice.
whether I'll have least time.
Actually, that's just actually kind of I think that's as much of a choice than the underlying reality. It's what you do with your time. But
Yeah,
um,
true. But it's
I
just that,
think so. I
yeah,
guess what I mean by that is time defined as I must work to provide for,
yeah, yeah.
food safety, etc. Right?
That's true.
Right. I mean that keeps going, down and down and down, and so people end up with blocks of time. They're different. There's certainly all of their time, the attention economy, if we want to call it that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
All of my time is attacked daily. If you
Mm,
turn things off, all of a sudden it gets quiet. It's like and then you seem to have a lot of time, right? Because you're
yeah.
not fighting off something, you're not eating, you're just okay. But a
But
little
what?
definition there is useful. But this
Indeed.
longevity, so your 23-year-old who says I'm going to be to live to 150, who might think that the world is abundant and that we're going to solve some, whether it's universal basic income or whatever,
Yeah,
we're going to
yeah,
solve
yeah,
the basics. The adage that time is short, it is still, but it's a lot less short than it was, and they
yeah.
may reinvent themselves four times, three
Uh,
times, and
indeed.
that's just we've never addressed that or even thought about that as a possibility, right? That you could go to school when you're 20, go to school when you're 50, go to school when you're 80, and go to school when you're 110, and then it all kind of whatever
Yeah,
it winds down at 145. That's just a strange idea.
yeah. Indeed. I mean, I talk about religion will change because you live longer. So, I mean, so I'm sure that's going to change. Marriage will change. You'll be married to the same person for 100 years. I mean, you go figure.
I'm not
So,
even sure. Yeah, well, I have children who are getting married, so I'm not even sure what that
yeah,
I'm not even sure what that means. But
yeah.
I don't need to touch that one today. We'll just say that it certainly is going to deserve, you know, attention. I think that's that last thing. There's a whole new renaissance of thinking
Yeah.
and philosophy that can come because I imagine if we that so much of original thinking and philosophy was built around a world when people died at 40 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
believe we'll maybe an unintended thing. I think we'll see a whole new group of thinkers,
Yeah.
philosophers, when the reality becomes clear or becomes the future becomes evident that we have 150-year lifespan.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see writings and thoughts. It's too bad Aristotle or whoever's not around
Yeah.
today, right, to think about that particular problem or whoever we wanted to have. But maybe
I,
the bot will give us the answer, right?
maybe it will. Erik, we can chat away like this for ages, and you're an extremely engaging conversationalist and storyteller, and with all the wonderful empathy and humanity that you have. Thank you for being here today. My final question is: let's get together in a little time capsule and project ourselves into the future as we're talking about longevity to your 100th birthday. What are we seeing around you? When you look out of the window, what do you see? What do you feel? What would you love to have?
Well, I'd love to see that some of the important themes we've talked about today, and some of the things around singularity, for example, that my team and myself we've been a good stewards and brought to life the possibilities, for example, in singularity that were, and it's only 12 years old, right? So it's only
Yeah,
12 years old.
yeah,
So I'm really hopeful that we've done a good job, right? Bringing the utopian view of the exponential future to a very, very, large audience. So and that's embedded in that and good ethics around that. I'm working on an exciting company. You know, we love moonshots and massive transformative persons. I'm working on a big company we hadn't mentioned, which was, Colossal Bioscience, which is the de-extinction company. You may be familiar with that.
I've heard of it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really really a fascinating application of synthetic biology and working with George Church's lab, and I'm very involved with that. It's de-extincting animals. It's being able, right, to save animals that might go extinct, and many other things. That's almost like a modern NASA, right? That is such a high-minded thing that says all of this technology is coming back together and bringing back things that maybe we've destroyed as people,
Yes.
and saving things that shouldn't be destroyed.
Yeah.
That's such an important brand and such an important beacon, if you will, of hope and caring, right, for our planet and ourselves, that I'm really hopeful that the principles behind that and some of those ideas will show that. And then all these areas of, of care, and that we bring people together, right, in meaningful ways across all of the interests, right? And people always like sports, and obviously I've done some of that, but art and music, all of these things. So, I hope we use our time well, right? The free time that we have 100 years, I hope we look back and say we have used it well, but more importantly, that the future free time that we have, right, that's unencumbered, that we've really created a place where people are using their time well.
What a wonderful way to end this lovely conversation, Erik Anderson. Thank you very much indeed. You a breath of fresh air in terms of coming from your space. And when we're looking at it from a distance, we look at capital without purpose. You coming in capital with purpose. And I dare say your early stage of your life with your mother and your nurse and growing up is giving you those basic values. And I think I'd like to end on my comment, and is that the more technological the world becomes, the more human we need to be. So, Erik, thank you very much indeed. A final word from you, and then we can close.
No, thank you for what you're doing, and I look forward to following up on this conversation on a regular basis and seeing where we are, and you helping hold me accountable and our organization accountable to staying on the path and some of the ideas I had. And I think your voice and your role, is a really important one, and you do it with great class and dignity, and I'm very thankful for you.
Thank you very much indeed. And if I can serve in any way, I dare say we can talk offline. I'd be absolutely delighted. It'll be my privilege to do so.
Be careful what you ask for, but I'm sure I'll find you.
Yes, I know.